the number one financial mistake you can make is get divorced. You lose half at least. You know, actually, it's more like you keep a third, the lawyer gets a third, and they get a third. But you know, it's a huge financial problem. It's, you know, a huge relational problem. Like you talk about, you want to know how you can tell if someone doesn't have a good marriage is when they're happier at work and don't want to go home.
What's up, studs? This is Dr. Besmer with The Educated Associate. So on today's podcast, we have Dr. Jimmy Turner with Money Meets Medicine. He is an anesthesiologist who actually built a business helping prevent burnout in medicine. I think it's equally as important in dentistry. He has then moved that into financial literacy because the point of all of this is to have a fulfilling and meaningful life and freedom and not be under the grasp of the government and IRS with student loans. So the topics range from obviously his personal story to the business he's built, how to build your own business, how to have that vision and execute to kind of have a long and successful and financially free career. So I hope you guys enjoy. Give us a follow, a subscribe, and a rating wherever you are listening to this. And let's get on with the pod. There we go.
Good morning.
Morning. How are y'all?
Wow.
Good, and yourself?
Good. Doing well.
It's funny. All the people we interview, it's cool to see the setups, like who's got the real professional, because I've got, I don't know if you guys can see my laundry's over there, you know, Tony looks nice. But
I got the office set up.
Yeah, totally.
How long did it take you? What's been the evolution of the podcast studio?
Well, so everything for me started out as a blog originally, but it turns out that's not the best idea if you're dyslexic. So, turned into a podcast, in like 2020. And then, yeah, it just kind of grew from there. So I had two podcasts at one point. One was kind of a solo podcast, called The Physician Philosopher, which is more like career coaching and that sort of thing. And then Money Meets Medicine. But yeah, so it's, I guess, been 6 years, and have gradually gone from like an ATR 2100 to, you know, a Rodecaster soundboard and setup and all that fun stuff.
Damn.
Yeah.
You've done like 300 episodes, huh?
Yeah. I've got like a couple million downloads, something like
that. Flex.
That's got to feel good.
How did you get advice on the AV, like all the updates? Because I don't know, we want our podcast eventually to get there, and we just interviewed like a big shot dentist. We flew into his studio, and so I like quality is number one, right?
Yeah.
So how did you learn how to set it up? All that fun stuff.
Yeah, so I actually use something called the Dr. Podcast Network, and they handle all my editing and stuff for me. And so I just talk into a microphone, and then it just kind of magically happens behind the scenes. I have two jobs. I'm an anesthesiologist, and I run a business, and so I don't have time to edit podcasts.
Right.
And so, you know, that said, it was, you know, gradual in terms of tech stuff. But, you know, in terms of what to buy and that sort of thing, you know, I also, when I first started podcasting, I podcasted with somebody that had experience. And so he kind of showed me the ropes and kind of how to go through things and that sort of stuff. So he was using a Rodecaster at the time, when we started podcasting together. And, so that's kind of how I got hooked on that stuff. Which this is great because like Riverside, like if it has like a moment, which it does occasionally, I can hit record on the soundboard and it'll record the audio on my soundboard too. And so whatever I'm hearing in my ears is actually what's being recorded there. And so it's a backup. And so like I've had times where like the audio quality for whatever reason on Zoom or Riverside or whatever didn't come out great, but I had that manual recording over here on this board.
Not a sponsor, but could be. So what you're saying is that mentorship is very important. Right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Building your business. So we could get into it. So this is Dr. Jimmy Turner. Dory, I did a little research beforehand. Yeah. So what is Dory? You can tell the people. I'm sure you've told it a million times, but for our audience.
Yeah. So my nickname is Dory, as in the forgetful fish. I'm terrible with names, faces. I mean, you name it. Rote memorization is not my thing. So I mentioned a second ago, I'm dyslexic. So I actually had somebody refer a book to me. It's probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's called The Dyslexic Advantage. And honestly, kind of changed my life and kind of how I viewed things because for a long time, I knew the things that I wasn't good at, rote memorization being
Mhm.
one of them. I knew I can't spell. The difference between ROLL and ROLE like trips me up every time. Still to this day, I can't spell so many words if they're homonyms. It's just or homophones. It completely screws me up. And so one of the things that comes with that is just having a really terrible rote memory. That's just part of being dyslexic, apparently. And so, but this book
Mhm.
talked about a lot of the advantages that come with it, and really opened my eyes. I'm like, yeah, I've noticed some of those things are my strengths. Actually, making really complicated things simple, or connecting, my love for philosophy and personal finance and business and medicine, and being able to grab things and bring them in from multiple fields. And so, I affectionately have earned the nickname Dory because I can never remember people's names. I'm not any much better with faces. And so my family, we have a routine in public where my wife will introduce herself to someone who clearly knows me. So they'll say their name. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right.
Yep. I have a little bit of that myself, so I can't relate as much to the dyslexia, but
Yeah.
I can't remember a name to save my life. And all my assistants in the office, I tell them, like, when I come in the room, it's your job to say the patient's name a number of times, so it just like it lands and it sticks,
Yeah.
and that'll last for forever. So
Yeah.
that's cool that
Absolutely.
you have the workaround with your wife. We got a
Yep.
similar thing, of
And
course.
now that I've got kids that are old enough, they help out too.
Hey, there you go. Get any hands involved. I love that.
Absolutely.
So
So
I curious about people like you. I went to dental school and we can all drill teeth, but you find the few people with like a little extra. So you talk about philosophy, right? I had friends in dental school who, hey man, we clock out. We said no tooth talk after 5 p.m.,
Hmm.
right? And then I had friends where you clock out at 5, you're still talking, and then something like philosophy, stoicism, pop. I don't know what sort of philosophers you are into, but for someone to be a doctor and you went to Wake Forest a few times. You couldn't get enough. Winston-Salem, like I don't know how
Right.
much of the city you own at this point. Um, you started this business. You have a course, all that fun stuff. Did you feel like you were a little different in high school, college, med school, like compared to your peers? Like, hey, I can't, I see the world a little differently. Also, given the dyslexia and ADHD, like, do you get where I'm going with that?
Yeah, so the thing that's always been different for me, I'm a man of faith, so I would say, my spiritual gift is wisdom. I've always been the person my entire life people come to for advice. And so to this day, if people have like parenting questions, like dating advice, marriage advice, they want advice on their career, negotiating a contract or situation in business, or hey, I've got this tough patient, I'm thinking through this anesthetic. I've always been the person people come to for advice, and I've recognized that for a really long time. And so, for me, that was always the thing that was a little bit different is kind of tapping into it's kind of interesting. Like some things for me are really, really hard that are very, very easy for a lot of people. And there's some things that
Mhm.
I'm really, really good at that for whatever reason seem to be really, really hard for a lot of people. And so when people are considering entrepreneurship, that's actually one of the things that I tell them to look into is like, hey, what things are really easy for you, but seem really hard for other people? And if you have that match up there, that's often a great business idea. And so
Mhm.
for me, that was kind of always what I noticed, and I gravitated towards leadership positions because of that. And really really enjoyed kind of being an advocate for other people because I had enough experiences of people being bad leaders and not advocating, and so it was always
Mhm.
something I enjoyed because I love the advice, I love the coaching, I love that aspect of leadership, and so that's probably the thing that I noticed earliest. I didn't realize the entrepreneur side of my personality until after training, which, to be honest with you, looking back, is probably a blessing. I don't know that I would have finished medical training if I knew I was an entrepreneur at heart from the very beginning. Because
Yeah.
unlike dentistry, most physicians don't own their own business. They don't have a ton of entrepreneurship. They don't have a lot of business interest or entrepreneurship, interest. And at least they think that. And some of us find out that that actually wasn't true. And so
Mhm.
so I didn't notice that different aspect of my personality until after fellowship in 2017 when I started my own business and wanted to start teaching people about personal finance. So always recognize the advice side of things and people coming to me for that. Didn't really recognize that I like really thinking outside the box and doing things differently. And I really don't like fitting in a box. I don't do well.
One thing I've kind of heard as we've chatted here is you've done an excellent job of like distilling who you are down to like traits, skill sets, advantages, disadvantages, things like that. I don't know if I've met a ton of people that are excellent at doing that upon themselves. I think we're always good at looking at another person and being like, well, she's great at dealing with conflict, but she's not so good with XYZ, or he's good at this, not so good at that. I've been super impressed just in a couple of minutes. You've listed off a couple of things that you were able to distill about yourself. You got one of those, it sounds like, through your book. How have you been able to grasp that, distill that, however you would say that?
Yeah, it's definitely been a journey, and I'll be honest with you. I think entrepreneurship is what opened my eyes to most of my faults and most of my strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
you get into business books, and you'll find out pretty quickly that there are two types of leaders, right? You've got the visionary CEO, and then you've got the organizationally detail oriented, person that makes the business run and does dots the I's
Mm-hmm.
and crosses the T's. I'm the visionary CEO guy. Like I know where we're
Mm-hmm.
going. I can tell you why we're going to get there. I can tell you how we're going to get
You're
there.
Michael Scott.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting though, because you don't have um I didn't have that insight until I ran a business. And then interestingly, my sister who's a nurse helped me as my business manager for a while. And she's the opposite, right? So she's the person that is the COO. She is the person that makes things tick and like, hey Jimmy, that's a great idea. I love what you're thinking. But if we do that, here are
But
the 18 things that breaks. So let's think through those 18 things before we launch this new product. And so for me, entrepreneurship really opened my eyes in terms of what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were, where I need help, where which kind of people I need around me to make me successful and to make the business successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that I always knew all of that. I think that entrepreneurship is really what got me thinking like, hey, how can I make this work? Because I would
Yeah.
have great successes and I would have hilarious failures because of my tendencies.
choosing to be a doctor, first of all, like anything else I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. You don't strike me as someone with an ego. I think also when we're young, how old are you, by the way, if you don't
I'm
mind?
40.
40. We choose to be doctors at 18, 22. Um, I personally know I had an ego 100%. Like I was in Greek life in college. Like I thought I was the hottest kid walking the planet. It's me, me, me. And then you go through that and then you start learning that it's not all about you, right? Um, you strike me as someone, obviously, no ego, like any of that. Anything else you wanted to do in life before becoming a doctor? I don't know, like where you're from, your background. I know there was a little family financial turmoil, not to get into that, but like personally, I did not grow up with a lot. So my mom told me to be a dentist because it would make me financially stable. Let's be honest, it would make me rich. I
Mhm.
hope everyone can see the air quotes. It is not the case at all. You make a good living in medicine and dentistry, but it's nothing like entrepreneurship, right? It's nothing like business. Why did you, I guess, become a doctor to begin with?
Yeah, so my journey in my exposure to medicine started when I was a kid. So my dad actually got shot in a hunting accident 5 years before I was born. And he was sitting in the bed of the truck, buddy walks up, you know, and he walks up, excuse me, the buddy's in the truck and he's unloading his gun and it misfires, hits my dad. And he ends up having all sorts of medical problems from this for the rest of his life. Basically, hits right next to his spine. He's got chronic regional pain syndrome, CRPS. So he's had chronic pain my entire life. And so I saw my dad go in and out of hospitals, in and out of doctors' offices growing up, and so I had exposure to medicine. I saw the good doctors and how they provided a ton of help. I saw some doctors that I never wanted to be like, and
Mm-hmm.
so my exposure was there. For me, that transition to wanting to become a doctor myself actually happened, when I became a Christian. I wanted to initially go into the mission field, which I've done a little bit of. Probably not as much as I thought I would back when I was 20 or 22, thinking about going into medicine. But for me, that was kind of the thing that ticked the boxes, like wanting to help other people and wanting to have a skill set that would allow me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went into college kind of with the idea of working towards medicine. And so I was a chemistry major to start with, found philosophy, loved it. And so I ended up double majoring in chemistry and philosophy. And honestly, if I could go back, I would have probably majored in philosophy and just done the minor and like the pre-med classes that I needed to take. Cause
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
philosophy degrees won't make you any money at all, but it'll make you a better human being.
No.
And
Yep.
so that's when I really started keying into, being intentional. And that's kind of how I try to live my life, is being intentional, pretty much everything. But for me, that transition happened, when I really wanted to help other people, and then just kind of continued from there. And I hilariously didn't have any doctors in my family. I knew nothing about medicine. Like there's step exams you have to take when you get to medical school. I didn't even know what those were. Like I got to
Mhm.
I was in medical school when I found out about all the licensure exams you had to take to become a physician. And so I didn't know they existed when I enrolled.
No, I love the honesty, and honestly, I was the same way with dental school. My wife's a pediatrician; she was the same way. I just remember like kind of going through and being like, "Oh God, we got step 3 now. How many of these steps are we going to do before they let us do see some patients?" You
Yep.
said something a couple minutes ago that I think resonates probably with all doctors, but I think it resonates deeply with like the surgical style doctor, and especially with dentists. So you said psychology was probably more important than the chemistry, and I know in my day
Philosophy.
to day life,
Philosophy.
sorry, I meant
Psychology
philosophy,
too.
Tony just
psych,
had his
but
third
like
kid, newborn, so like I'm gonna
I
help
had a
him get
rough
back
night
on
last
track.
night.
Hey,
Yeah, I'm
congrats.
sorry. Thank you. Yeah, he was up all night. Um, so I think that dealing with patients, thinking through situations, I've never needed the Krebs cycle again. So like is in your career, has dealing with people, thinking through problems been vastly more important than anything you learned in chemistry? Is that kind of been
Oh,
true in your life
oh,
in medicine?
100%. And like
Yeah.
going back to that dyslexia thing and my inability to memorize stuff. Yeah, I almost failed out of medical school my first year of medical school. I was 103 out of 119,
Hmm.
and so that's part of how I found out I have this massive reading disability that I've always kind of coped with just because of IQ, and just
Hmm.
never noticed. People noticed, and I went to like the Sylvan Center and all that stuff when I was younger, like for SAT prep because I did my reading rate was abysmal. Um, but yeah, so I got to medical school, and obviously you got to learn all that stuff, right, to take step one.
Hmm.
I still think that
Yep.
the score I got was like someone else's score, and they just actually accidentally like transposed it. I did better, way better than I thought I would do. And so but like in practice, yeah, psychology, philosophy, 100%,
Hmm.
has a much bigger impact than chemistry. I mean, as an anesthesiologist, it's a little bit unique because I actually do have to know phys and pharm pretty well and
Hmm.
chemistry because that's what I do every day. And so I need to understand what the
Hmm.
drugs I'm giving somebody do and how they interact with physiology and all that sort of stuff. And so it's applied physiology. It's a lot of fun. But I'd be lying to you if I said that I don't have to have very difficult conversations with family and, and with patients. And
Hmm.
oftentimes in a very short, brief period where, hey, I have to meet you, I have to make you like me in about 30 seconds, and I have to let me trust you with your life in, the next
Hmm.
30 seconds. Right. And so
Yep.
because of that, I tell my residents all the time, when I was back in academia, I just changed jobs and I'm now in private practice. But for 10 years, I would tell my residents how you talk to patients will absolutely dictate what they decide to do because we often are told, hey, patriarchal medicine is this terrible thing, which I think is hilariously a bad take. I know it's not a super popular, hot take moment here, but I know
Hmm.
it's, something that people are told all the time. Like, no, 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 just give the patient the information, black and white, and let them make the decision. And I would say, if you think that, you fundamentally don't understand psychology because the way that you
Hmm.
speak to somebody will 100% impact the decision that they make, whether they proceed with the procedure or not. And it turns out
Hmm.
that you're going to do that whether you mean to or not. So you might as well intentionally guide them to a decision that you think based on your experience and expertise is best for them. Now you need to flesh out the full picture, give them the pros, the cons, the risks, the benefits, and all that stuff. But let's not pretend that our conversation with a patient and how we have it doesn't impact whether they decide to proceed because it does 100%. And anybody that's been in training and had the attending or the practicing person come in behind them and have the same conversation and they change their mind will see that all the time, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so philosophy, psychology, it impacts those things. It impacts, end of life conversations and like, hey, do you want to continue this DNR when you're having surgery? You want us to resuscitate you or not? And having that conversation thoughtfully so that the person actually understands what you're saying and can make a decision based on, their value system.
What is DNR? You're
Do,
talking to a different crowd.
sorry, do not resuscitate.
Okay.
So that means
Can
like
you
you stop, you die on the table. Do you want me to save your life or not? Do you want me to do chest compressions, break your ribs, shock you, like do all of those things, or do you want me to let grandma go?
Hmm.
Okay, can you please go into that? Because when my mom told me to be a dentist, it was kind of like it's a promised land, right? To use a religious term. So everyone's just going to say yes to everything. And we have had multiple guests on talking about sales in dentistry. And the way I like to describe it, everyone thinks sales is a dirty word. We're selling dental health. Like that's our product, right? If you're doing it the right way. And I love hearing everyone's different experiences and approaches to exactly this, talking to patients, because when you get out, I mean, a crown, if you're fee for service, is like $2,000. You know, when Tony and I first got out, can I imagine spending $2,000 on a tooth for medicine? It's a little different. I'm actually not sure about private practice, but you know, if insurance covers it, you're not paying for it, so it doesn't matter. But the taxpayers are paying for it, or whoever the employer. Um, but it's either $2,000 to save your tooth or multiple teeth, or it's the Gucci bag, or it's the trip to Italy, or it's, you know, something that, in my humble opinion, maybe for that patient isn't worth it at the moment. So how do you approach the psychology and philosophy of trying to get patients to see the value of what you're doing?
Yeah. So two things. One's from an entrepreneurship lens, which I'll say anybody that gets into business and you're selling a product or a service, if you're a decent human being, you're often going to feel at first like sales is sleazy. That's just
Mhm,
the natural kind of evolution of someone that runs a business. You're like, this just feels weird. Um,
mhm,
and the transition that needs to be made there is that sales isn't sleazy. Sales is service, right? You're
mhm,
trying to provide a service to somebody, and part of that process is selling them on it, meaning that they need to understand their pain point. They need to understand what going from A to B looks like, and what A and B are, and how you're going to help them accomplish that goal. So, you know, in the situation that you're giving, it might be the $2,000 tooth. Um, how you talk to people, right? So there's a good example of this. So there's really good studies on behavioral psychology, and some of it taps into personal finance, which is when I run into this stuff. But one example in medicine is they did a study where they basically had patients with lung cancer, and they said, hey, we're going to break them up into two different groups. We're going to tell them all that, hey, when you have surgery, this is a highly successful surgery. If you go, if you go through a surgery, you've got a really good chance of being cancer free at some point in the future, compared to radiation. And then what they did is they broke them up into two groups after that information. They said to one group, with this surgery, you've got a 90% chance to make it off the table, right? You're gonna live. And the other two, they said 10% chance of dying. You're gonna die on the table, 10% chance. And with that framed differently, it's the same exact information, which is why I think patriarchal, the ideology is stupid. Which is that 90% that were told, hey, it's going to be something that you're going to live through. Like 85% of them proceeded. The group that got told, hey, there's a
mhm,
10% chance of dying on the table, which is the same number said differently, it was like 50, right? And so
mhm,
framing your conversation such that people realize, hey, this is the procedure. This is the benefit that you're getting from it, right? If they're mainly concerned about risks, I would frame things positively. And if
mhm,
they're not at all concerned about risks, then maybe framing it negatively and pointing out, hey, if you don't do this, here are the consequences. And I just want to let you know what those are. And it's completely up to you. And I think it's important too to maintain people's autonomy. And so the second that someone feels like
mhm,
you're telling them what to do, in some ways, it's kind of Jedi mind trick stuff, right? But if they feel like you're
mhm,
telling them what to do, some patients will say, hey, I just want you to tell me what to do. In that case, just tell them what to do. But a lot of patients are like, no, I want to make this decision. It's like, okay, no problem. I want to see what your values are. Maybe your value is that your Gucci purse is more important than the tooth. I don't know. I'm not here to judge that, here or there. What I can tell you is that if you don't get this tooth repaired, these are the consequences from it and the potential costs that you'll incur later by not fixing this tooth now. And then framing it such
mhm,
a way that the patient's like, oh, well, I guess when you've put it that way, is usually what they'll say. Uh, I
mhm.
guess I'll proceed.
When was
That's
first
I was going to say, for never having had to talk to someone about a tooth, that was such a good rendition of what happens very often in the clinics. Yeah, so I loved that. And if you're a non-physician, a non-dentist listener that happens to be listening to today's episode, really what we're getting at is talking to you, talking to the patient, hearing what you guys are kind of thinking, those values, and then just speaking in your own terms. And yeah, you said the Jedi mind tricks, but really it's just talking to the patient the way that they want to hear it, and then you're providing the solution that they need. They walk themselves
Well,
to.
yeah,
You're not like you need the crown.
right, and I guess I'm skipping the most important step, which is nobody will care what you say if they don't realize that you care, right? And so the very first step in any of these conversations is to say, like, what is your concern? Like, I really want to understand and wrap my head around what is the pivotal thing that's helping you make this decision one way or the other, right? So, what's your concern with what we're recommending, right? And they'll tell you, and then you can frame that
Mhm,
conversation. That framing happens around their concern, and it can be better
mhm,
explained because now you're using the words that they use, you're using the concerns that they have, and then you're explaining them, right? And so when you do that, it allows you to have a lot more success.
I think actually for dentistry and medicine. We're dealing with oral health, systemic health, all that fun stuff. Tony and I are going through this part of business where we're struggling with that, right? We just kind of started this. I mean, it's about a year since we started working on it. I think we were kind of floundering with what we actually wanted to provide as a product, what we thought our skills were. I am interested to hear about your first business venture, because I think so I learned about you yesterday or last week, whenever Tony said we were going to do this podcast.
Mhm.
And I was like, holy smokes, I want to be like you. But at some point, you were like us.
Mhm.
Starting out, you had just figured out, what is my first product? And Tony and I, he texted me, we got 2 clients in 24 hours, which for us is like a world record, right? We're
That's
like
great.
still at that stage of our business. Talk us through, first of all, what your first product was, how you got there, like how you figured out what your skill set was, and your first client, or whatever it was, right? Because I'm looking at this little prep sheet that I have, and you do like a lot of everything. But like, who was Dr. Turner or Jimmy when he first started business?
Yeah. So the very first thing that I did was create the Physician Philosopher in November of 2017, and it was just a blog. I saw other physicians in the space have personal finance blogs for doctors and saw them be successful. Thought that I had a very different take on things. And so early on, the differentiator for me, which is always the question, who are you serving? What are you providing them? And how are you different? Right? You got to answer those 3 questions. Because to skip forward in the journey a little bit, and then I'll go back to answer your question. Most business owners don't realize when they first start that this product that you're building is probably not what people want. And so they have a really hard time taking a pivot because they spent so much time building this thing. And then they found out very early it wasn't what people wanted. Didn't lead to clients, didn't lead to enough money to move the needle to make it worth your time. And so the people that fail stay. Like they just get stuck in what they're doing and they're like, no, this is gonna work. There's something to be said about perseverance, but pivoting in entrepreneurship is really important, and taking the signals that you get, because it is laughable how often someone builds a product, a course, a business, a service, and then they find out that people don't want it, but they spent hundreds of hours or dozens of hours building this thing. Instead of just launching, like just launch, put it out in the world, see if people like it, and then change things from there. Like that is, you need to get your minimum viable product, your MVP out there, and then you need to just change it as you go based on the feedback that you're getting from people. Because hilariously, even if you ask other people, what do you want? And then you build that thing, half the time they don't really want it. They just wanted it in their head. But then when the thing actually exists, they don't really want it. Right. And so that's just
Yeah.
called running a business. So for me, it started out as a blog. I posted 3 posts every single week, 1,500 word posts for 2 years. Lots of
Damn.
misspelled words, because Grammarly wasn't the thing back then, and or at least I didn't know about it. And
And no AI to help you write it.
no, exactly, yeah. So it was
Yeah.
all there. I've wrote hundreds of thousands of words. And so for me, that's where it started. And so the monetization side of that is like, okay, well, I knew who I was writing for. I was writing for residents, fellows, early career attendings. Naturally that brought in other people, that brought in dentists, that brought in APPs that came along for that ride when they found my stuff. What differentiated me was that I always linked personal finance to like financial freedom, that concept, to one way to combat burnout, which is epidemic proportions in medicine. I don't know if that's the same thing for dentists, but in medicine, it's real bad. And so the products that I could offer, the monetization that happens there when you have a blog, is sponsorships, right? I'm writing a blog. I can get sponsors that want that same group of people to use their products. And so it started there and gradually went into creating a course. So I, ended up launching a 6-figure online course. And after I grew, my following, and then, from there, it's just kind of morphed, right? It went from blog to sponsorships, ads, to courses, to, I did career coaching for a few years. I don't do that anymore. And so I did career coaching for a few years, hired coaches to work for me that were other doctors that could help coach the clients. And so, that was really successful for a couple of years until I realized I didn't want to be on Zoom calls all the time. And so, as much as I love giving advice to people, like the idea that my calendar was full every day, I have no interest in that. Way too ADD.
Yeah.
And so, blog, ended up having course, then coaching services. And then eventually, I spent some time in a VC-backed startup that I helped
Mm-hmm.
run, created a disability insurance business inside of that. When it failed, I took it back, and then we created our own disability insurance business. And the reason that I did that was because all those people that I was recommending, I had a really hard time finding insurance agents, like a really, really hard time finding insurance agents that would actually do the right thing for people. They would almost always do whatever made the most money. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had story after story after story of people getting hosed by an insurance agent, which is what happened to me when I was a fourth year med student. That's what ended up, spawning my interests eventually later into personal finance. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I went from blog and sponsorships to courses to a service through, coaching to eventually building a disability insurance business. And so 99% of what I do now is financial literacy and educating people on personal finance. And then when they need disability insurance, we provide that service. And so I've gone from a very complicated business model where I did a little bit of everything to now we just do financial literacy and disability insurance. And it is super simple.
What's the name of the
Well,
so I've been denied by every single disability insurance company, and I just met someone who works for a company that will not be named because they don't sponsor this podcast. They can if they want to. And then I just looking you up learned about GSI, which I did not know was a thing. I don't know if that's the route I should go. Maybe we'll talk offline, but what is the name of your company if you're allowed to tell us?
Yeah.
And, who should reach out? Pretty much just give us the lowdown on that part.
Yeah. So everything I do now is underneath Money Meets Medicine brand. So it's Money Meets Medicine Disability Insurance. You can go to moneymeetsmedicine.com/disability and learn more about my story there. And yeah, so for me, it's probably helpful to tell that story, but it's unique because this is an audience with dentists, right? So, and I'll tell you why that's unique here in a second because you mentioned the GSI. But suffice it to say, and I guess I won't name any companies either because it's your podcast, but there was a very large mutual insurance company when I was a fourth year med student that talked me into applying for disability insurance. I had a tremor, I took propranolol, had an ADHD diagnosis on my chart, and so I ended up getting denied. I was a fourth year med student who had literally had no income. So for the record, those of you that are
yeah.
listening, you should not get disability insurance if you don't have an income to protect, because that's literally the purpose of that product. I was married to someone who made money though. So he's like, I can sell this person a disability policy. I didn't know when I got denied that it was a big deal because I got to medical training and for physicians, and I think this is probably true for oral surgeons when you do residency, but you have to be in a residency or fellowship. And when you are, there's something called a guaranteed standard issue plan. It's guaranteed disability coverage. It's individually owned, own occupation, the good stuff. It is guaranteed so long as you haven't been disabled before or you haven't been denied. And so since I got denied as a fourth year
Okay.
medical student, I to this day am uninsurable. And so in my world, when I started doing financial literacy and started teaching other people about personal finance, and disability insurance is something that every single doctor should have. That's like the one product that is not controversial at all to recommend because everybody recognizes you need it. I ended up running into the same problem where I would send people from my audience to insurance agents and have the same exact thing happen. And it would make me furious. And so I ended up creating a business because I really couldn't find anybody that I knew would not do that to other people, because the reason why is they often don't have access to those GSI policies. And so they won't make money from it. So instead of doing the right thing for somebody and like handing it off, they will try to run the policy knowing there's a 30% chance you're going to get denied. And when people got denied, they'd be like, hey, it just didn't work out. And they wouldn't tell them that it totally just screwed them and they're now permanently uninsurable and just experience a catastrophic financial mistake in that process. So I too have been denied. I shouldn't have been because I should have gotten the GSI when I was in residency. But the GSI is only available for residents. And
All
so
right.
if you're a practicing doctor, then the GSI is no longer an option at that point, which is one reason that you should get it as early as possible, because that's when you're healthiest. It costs less. You lock in discounts. And it turns out the longer you wait, the more likely you are to have medical history, which will get you denied.
Quick little pause here just to ask you for a kind favor. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our podcast wherever you are watching or listening to this. Tell us how we're doing. Leave us a little rating. And if you are a dentist about to sign a contract or looking to switch jobs and don't want to get caught in legal trouble, save yourself tens of thousands of dollars and possibly make that much more by negotiating your pay, reach out to us. We'd love to review your dental contract. Awesome, guys. Thanks for listening. let's keep going with the pod. And as much as I would love to spend the next 30 minutes to an hour talking about disability insurance, if you have any questions, please go to, moneymeetsmedicine.com. Yep, Money Meets Medicine. Reach out to Jimmy with all your questions. So what advice would you give? So I think the crowd that listens to us, so Tony and I, we are associates. I don't know if they have the same term. We're not we're essentially, we don't own our own practice, right? We work for someone, but we aspire for something bigger. And what we've learned is that doesn't always have to be owning a practice. I think a lot of people who listen also have side hustles. I heard this, it's the side hustle generation, right? So always something else or something more to life. Some people just love drilling teeth. So for those people, so it's funny you talk about switching right? You started your business, realized no one wanted it. I think Tony and I tried to do the financial literacy and personal finance, more of just budgeting. You'd be surprised the amount of people, high earning people, that don't have a basic Excel sheet with budgets.
Given what I do, I'm not surprised at all.
I remember I was talking to my orthodontist friend, and in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, let me learn about this guy's situation. Maybe he could be a great fit for our product or company. And I'm like, hey man, what do you do for budgeting? And he's like, and his wife is a high earner as well, white collar high earner, I think. And he's like, I don't know, the money just kind of comes in and we check the bank accounts, and as long as it's going up, we're going in the right direction. And I'm like, oh my God, but that didn't work out for us. So we pivoted, dental contract review. It's going better than anything we had tried before. We obviously have bigger ideas, kind of like you. For that company that's been doing it for a year or two, you spent 2 years just, doing the blog and getting the audience. What would you recommend, honestly, to us? We're always looking at, how do we just kind of keep going? We have those days where we're like, man, is this worth it? We don't really see any traction or anything, even though it is there. I mean, based on what we're doing, what would you recommend to this side hustle generation that's kind of we make enough, but we want more out of life? Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll answer that question first. So I'm a big fan that you need to follow where your energy goes. If you're doing something that drains you, man, you shouldn't be doing it. Because there's no amount of money that's going to allow you to have a life where you're like, hey, I'm going to put up with this thing and just hate my life. You're not, that's never going to be okay. Right. So, that coaching business that I mentioned earlier, in the highest year, I think I pulled in $700,000 from that coaching business. I don't do it anymore. I don't do it anymore. Right now, running a coaching business was more complicated. I had coaches. So we pulled in 700. I probably made 250 from that. So a lot of it went to my coaches and to overhead and to running the program and all that stuff. And I could have kept doing that. Interestingly, I mean, I still have emails from people that said hey, this saved my life. This saved my career. It was very impactful work for people that I was working with. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't super fulfilling for me. And so that may sound selfish, but I got to live my life too. Right. And so I realized the number one thing that I want in my life is autonomy. I want control over my time. And that business would lock me down to Zoom calls all day long. And eventually I realized I just don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that. On my days where I'm not working at the hospital, I want to be able to go outside and play pickleball for 2 hours if that's, what I want to do right now. And I just wasn't able to do that because I had calls all day long in that business. And so don't do something just for the financial reward of it. And I know that's a bit cliche advice, but having lived it, it actually does matter. I would rather have a simpler business that makes less money, that frees up some of my time, than have the super complicated multi-million-dollar business that doesn't allow me to ever take a break. Right. And so how to keep going when it gets hard is tap into that. Why is it hard? Is it hard because you can't figure out a problem, but it's still a business you care about and it's something you love doing and you want to solve it, but it's just hard because entrepreneurship sucks sometimes and your ideas fail and you got to pivot and, try something new. I mean, and you just feel stuck. If it's hard for that reason, then the answer is, hey, measure stuff, right? What is your cost per lead? How much do you make per, what's the LTV, the lifetime value of a person when they come into your world? How are you collecting those people? How are you transitioning them through the process? Where are they dropping off? right, in your process. And so if the problem is it's hard because it's just not moving the needle because you're not having a lot of business success, the answer is to look at the data, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you have feelings. Data is just facts, right? So you can have
Yes.
narratives and perspectives and paradigms about what those facts are and what they mean, but the facts are the facts, right? So go back and actually measure it, because most businesses fail. Like the overwhelming majority of business ideas fail, and so staying stuck to a business idea that's not working drains you and it's terrible and it's not fun. And there's nothing wrong with pivoting. Like I cannot tell you how important it is as an entrepreneur to be nimble and to pivot when things aren't working. I do want to make one comment about budgeting. So I'm going to give you a counter perspective. I hate budgeting. I absolutely hate budgeting. I'm 40 years old. We have over $2 million in net worth. I hate budgeting. So we do cash flow planning because I mentioned earlier, right? I'm not a detail oriented person. So Excel sheets and like knowing where every dollar's going is just not something that in my entire life's existence will ever happen. I'm just not that guy. And so if you're listening to this and you love budgeting, great. It's a fantastic tool. It's actually really good for you if that's your thing. If you can do it, great. If you're like, I hate budgeting, but I still want to be financially successful. For us, we ascribe, jobs for the dollars that come into our world, right? So we save first and then we spend what's left. So for us, it's like I'm going to meet my annual savings goal so I can be financially independent by the age that I want. I'm going to meet our other savings goals if that's college for the kids or like saving up for some vacation or whatever. And then we're going to spend what's left. And I literally don't care how it's spent, right? As long as I'm not tapping into like debt into my spending.
Right.
And so we'll backtrack and be like, hey, this month was a little more than we probably wanted it to be. We had to tap into our savings on that one. We'll look back and see what we did, like retroactively, but we do not prospectively budget. I've never had to, and because we take care of the financial tasks first, I know that I can afford anything else that I do after that. And so for me, I don't budget. Have never budgeted.
Right.
And so that said, if you can budget and you like details, it's actually really good for you. I highly recommend it. It's actually very freeing when you know you can afford something because you've actually budgeted it. But like that's just not my personality. So I wanted to just give a different perspective on that.
Hot take also for whoever listening. If you heard that, Dr. Turner is extremely reckless and not financially savvy. Yeah, no, I love that because the goal is the same, right? Make enough money, save enough money, feel fulfilled, get more out of life. How you go about that. So I guess our idea of budgeting was not even similar, but it's not like count every penny, but it's like, what are your goals? Right? How much do you make? What do you usually spend on? Let's, because the way we think about it is not like, oh, I want to buy a practice. It's like, hey, I want to like spend more time with my wife and I want to go out to dinner and not even look at the bill. Right. So it's like, all right, how much do we have to put aside? Kind of like you said, and then just blow the rest. Don't even think about it. Right. So that's really cool. I feel like, these podcasts for us are usually just, they try and be casual conversations. We have some topics, but is there anything about Money Meets Medicine or yourself or a message you want to give out to the world? I think I've gotten more into my faith lately and I've met a lot of faithful people. And I think being in STEM, some people have those conflicts. I'm sorry, I know I just said, tell us what you want, but can you actually talk about how faith made an impact in your life? Because you said you became a Christian later. It seems like later in life. So how has that kept you going? Because I know it's really helped me lately in my downtimes.
Yeah. So I became a Christian when I was a junior in high school, actually. So I was relatively young. So for me, really kind of comes down to identity, right? So when the world doesn't make sense, when things are hard, like what is the truth that you latch onto? And at the end of the day, we all have a religion, whether we want to or not, right? Like even if you say that you're agnostic or you're atheist, like your belief system is that there is no God and that, you've weighed these truth claims over here and these truth claims over here that are all around us. And you said, I think that this truth claim is heavier and has more merit than the alternative, right? And so we're all doing that in our different belief systems. And so for me, it gives me a solid foundation to fall on when I know that, hey, this is who God has called me to be. This is what my identity is in Jesus. And this is who I'm trying to become, right? And I'm not there yet. I'm just like anyone else. I've got my faults, my failures, my sins. And so for me, it gives me a way to understand this world. And I've actually, so I was a philosophy major, right? So I love talking to other people that have different beliefs, different faith systems, different values. I love talking to people that are atheists. I'm the only Christian in my family. Like I've got, my oldest sister is pagan. She's Wiccan. My middle sister is agnostic. Right. And so we have some amazing conversations you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I love being around that. And I love learning from other people and what their thoughts and their beliefs are. But for me, it's the root of my identity. And so when I have questions about why things are going the way that they are, right? I still have hope, right? When I have questions about
Mm-hmm.
why something didn't work out, like there's an answer, right? When I don't understand why things are so hard right now, I can have a foundation that allows me to weather those storms in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, fundamentally, that's who I am. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know this. I imagine this is true for dentists too. It's kind of doctors in general, right? That a lot of us, our identity is being a doctor. And I have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of friends where, like, if they got disabled or they got hurt and they couldn't practice medicine anymore, they would literally not know who they are. They would not know
Yeah.
who they are. All of my friends call me Jimmy. All of my kids, my friends' kids, they call me Mr. Turner. I'm not Dr. Turner to anybody unless I'm in front of a patient. And that's really more for the patient than it is
Mm-hmm.
for me, just to describe, like, hey, this is actually the doctor's helping take care of you. Like, to everyone else in my world, I'm Jimmy. Right. And that's very
Yeah.
intentional for me because that's not what my identity is. I love being a doctor. I love practicing medicine. I'm actually really, really good at it too. But at the same time, like, that's not who I am. Like, my identity is being a
Mm-hmm.
God fearing husband and father in that order. Right. And which is another controversial take, but like my marriage comes first, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why we have an incredibly successful marriage, and our kids are happy, and they know what a good relationship looks like. And so for me, it comes down to that identity, because if you look at, there's actually a really good book. It's called Taking Stock. It's written by a friend of mine, he's a palliative care hospice physician, but he basically talked to people at the end of their life, like, hey, what was really important to you? Like, what are the things you really enjoyed? What are the things that you regretted not having done? What are the things you're super glad that you did do? Like, reflect on your life. And when it comes down to it, we all need three things to really flourish, and that is purpose, connection, and identity, right? So, like, what is your purpose? What are you doing with this life? This is the reason why people retire and they become miserable, because they lose their purpose, right? Where's your connection? Where's your community, right? It could be church, it could be a synagogue, it could be the pickleball courts. I don't know, like wherever you meet people, right? And then what is your identity? And those three things fundamentally should not necessarily and ideally not be linked to your job. And if they are, when that job goes away, you, my friend, are going to have an existential crisis. And I see this
Mm-hmm.
literally all the time. And so for me, that identity and knowing who I am, regardless of how my life goes, whether I'm successful or whether I'm not, is so fundamentally important to me that, I couldn't really be any other way.
You led yourself into where I wanted to take this anyways. You have kids, you have a wife. I'm in the same boat. You're obviously juggling and managing. I can't even begin to name all the things it sounds like you're doing on your day-to-day basis. So, and then you mentioned you have this excellent marriage. I think there's a lot of, especially, I worked in a cardiology office before dental school. All the cardiologists were pulling in a million plus. They all got divorced like at least twice. So,
Yep.
how have you managed to have this amazing marriage, have these amazing businesses, still, and honestly, for the dentists out there, anesthesia is one of the hardest fellowships. It's really hard to get into. So, this guy's a dog in so many fields. So, like, how have you managed to do all of that?
Yeah. So for my marriage, I think that being intentional, honestly, is the answer for pretty much most of my life. Like how I've been successful in medicine, business, being a good dad, being a good husband. I'm intentional. Like the unexamined life is what I'm trying to avoid, right? And so in
Mhm.
every aspect of my life, I am insanely intentional, right? So when it comes to marriage, like, you ask my kids, this hot take, you talk about hot takes, this is a hot take. If you ask my kids, who does daddy love the most? All three of them will tell you that it's my wife. And they know that. All right. And that's like a super hot
Mhm.
take. Like, there are people listening to this that, like, just like stop listening to the episode because, like, no, my kids come first. And I'm like, look, you got to decide your value system, completely fine. But I can tell you, for us, because my wife knows that she's my number one priority, and because I know that I'm hers, it provides this foundation to our marriage that's, pretty much unshakable. And, like, we have a common belief
Yeah.
system that is also super helpful, because it turns out, that particularly when you have kids, like, if you want to figure out a way to get divorced, it's usually involving the bedroom, the bank account, or how you raise your kids. And you can have
Yep.
different belief systems, but when you have kids and they start asking questions, it becomes really, really hard. I've seen some people be successful with that
Mhm.
for sure. But when you have children like that, it becomes a harder conversation, to be honest with you. And so
Yeah.
for us, having a common belief system, knowing exactly where we stand, knowing that we're each other's number one priority, has been foundational to our success. And I'd be lying if I said that us being believers isn't a part of that, right? Like my wife has to show an unbelievable amount of grace and forgiveness for my stupidity all the time, like all the time, right? And
Mhm.
having someone that doesn't have a tit for tat relationship, well, you did this, so I do that. Like we don't believe in that stuff. I think it's
Mhm.
garbage. I think it's unhelpful and it's not healthy in a relationship. So hey, when I do
Mhm.
stupid stuff, she's not holding it against me. Like there's no, record of wrong in our relationships. My
Mhm.
wife's not holding this grudge from something I did 10 years ago. That's not a thing in our marriage. We move past things, we forgive each other, and we move on, right? And we show our kids what repentance and forgiveness look like. It's okay to make
Mhm.
mistakes. You should apologize for them. You should own it. It doesn't mean there's not a
Mhm.
consequence, right? But
Yeah.
you can still
Yeah.
love somebody through their failures, through their mistakes, and having that knowledge that my wife is like that. She's a teacher. She's still, she works too, and she's got teacher of the year for the county last year. She's incredible at what she does. I always tell people she's a better teacher than I am a doctor.
Mhm.
She's amazing, right? But like knowing that I don't have to walk on eggshells and knowing that my wife is going to love me and forgive me even if I'm a miserable human being sometimes, provides a lot of room for me to be human. And so I think those are some of the things that have helped make us successful.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always heard, and I believe this is true, the most important decision you make in life is who becomes your partner. I'm assuming you would 100% agree with that.
Oh yeah, I mean, in so many different ways, right? In terms of life satisfaction, fulfillment, that side of things, which is obviously what's most important. But yeah, the number one financial mistake you can make is get divorced. You lose half at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Actually, it's more like you keep a third, the lawyer gets a third, and they get a third. But
Yep.
it's a huge financial problem. It's a huge relational problem. Like you talk about, you want to know how you can tell if someone doesn't have a good marriage is when they're happier at work and don't want to go home. So you have those people that just kind of stay later and they're just kind of doing things and like you're like, hey, like what are you doing? And they're like, well,
Yeah.
I just got stuff to do. I'm like, don't you have like kids at the house or like a husband or a
Stuff
wife?
to
Like,
do.
yeah, stuff to
Yeah.
do. And they're like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna finish up here. Like they don't want to go home. They don't want to go home.
Mhm.
Right. And so like I never want to be in that. I don't want to have that existence. And so
Mhm.
uh choosing the right partner is obviously, you know, a big deal.
Imperative. Yeah. As you probably seen, I'm constantly writing notes about things that you've said. So I wanted to circle back one more time to the business and everything. I feel like we are kind of in that phase with our business where it maybe is ramping up and getting crazy complicated. There's Zoom calls, there's all sorts of stuff like that. And you talked about kind of going back to a super simple model. And it probably took those 6 years of battling through things and realizing you didn't want to spend all day on Zoom. Um, but how have you managed to keep this company simple, and how are you planning to keep it simple going forward, not let it get complicated? Is that where your sister is going to come in and be that strategic manager, or
Yeah, so since I don't do the coaching business anymore, I don't have a business manager. So she's just having fun
okay,
being a neonatal ICU nurse. Um, and so
nice.
she works in the NICU now. I don't think I can get her to come back to work with me if I begged her. She likes her job, but for me, it comes down to a couple things in terms of concepts. One is simplicity. Get really clear on what you do and who you serve. Like you don't
Hmm.
need 15 different offerings. You can be successful with one. Now you might need to try 15 different
Hmm.
things to find the one thing, but like once you find the one thing, like double down on it. That's
Right.
that's how you make a lot of money and help a lot of people. Hopefully in the opposite order, help a lot of people to make a lot of money. But
Hmm.
the other is scale, right? So what can you? So there's a person in the entrepreneur space, online entrepreneur space, that has this acronym. It's DAD, right? So delegate, automate, delete, right? So what can you delegate to someone else? In other words, have a good team around you, and then what can you
Hmm.
let them do? To help you with tasks. Like I don't edit my episodes. What can
Hmm.
you automate? And so for me, that will come down to like if if you haven't used Claude as an AI, for
Oh,
example, it is mind blowing. Like
it is.
mind blowing. So every month, like actually today, I will be recording all of my hence my garb. I'll be recording all of my Instagram reels for the entire month for Money Meets Medicine. And so
Okay.
because of that, I currently, I batch everything, right? But like,
Hmm.
I absolutely take the scripts that I get sent by my video company that helps me do all this, and they send me ideas and stuff. And physician finance and doctor finance is so niche of a subject. Like, there's no way they could send me scripts and they'd all be good. It's just not
Yeah.
possible. And so I upload that puppy into Claude. I'm like, Claude, because Claude's downloaded my book. Claude knows my podcast. Claude knows my blog
Hmm.
articles. What do you think about these scripts and what should I change? And like, man, is it helpful, right? Speeds up my
Yep.
process immensely. And now I don't have to pay for, a VA. And so, automating things is another great way to do things. And then, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but delete. A lot of people spend time in that quadrant of like, if you break down the quadrant of important, not important, and urgent, not urgent, way too
Hmm.
much time is spent in the not urgent, not important box, or the, hey, it's urgent, but still not important, right? Like, so we get
Hmm.
trapped in like, hey, I just need to feel busy, especially if your business is online, you have an internet connection 24 hours a day. You get into that talk of like, hey, I should be working on my business right now because I have an internet connection. That's a great way to burn out in entrepreneurship, by the way. I did that pretty badly.
Hmm.
Um, but all that to say, so delegate what you can, automate what you
Hmm.
can, and delete what you can, and make it as simple as possible. You're gonna have to try to pivot and try different iterations on what actually works. But like in my business model, like it's pretty simple. I've two pipelines, right? I've got a podcast where people can enjoy long form content if that's something that they enjoy. And through that podcast, I point them to the disability insurance business when they need disability insurance, they get to that stage of their life. I have Instagram, which I just started like 15 weeks ago because I had shoulder surgery. I was out for 3 months, so I decided, hey, I can focus on something else.
Okay.
And so, I've gone from like 2,000 people to almost 30,000 people in 15 weeks. And
Hmm.
the reason how I did that was I studied it. I was like, hey, how does this thing work? How does it work? What works well? Experimented, puts lots of different, types of reels up and posts and figured out, oh, this is how this thing works. And then behind that, I have a mini chat automation, right? So anyone that follows me on Instagram gets an
Hmm.
automatic message, says, hey, why are you here? To learn about money, disability insurance, or just following? If they click to learn about money, I offer my free book, which gives me an email address, which, by the way, in an online business is literally the most important asset that you can have, email addresses.
Hmm.
And so I get an email address, they get on my newsletter, I provide them tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of value. And then when I have something to offer, if it's a course or disability insurance business services, like they see that, right? And
Hmm.
so all it's about is just offering tons and tons and tons of free value to people, and then having a service on the back end that that they need. Because at the end of the day, you have to build something called a know, like, trust, right? I'm sure you've run into that
Hmm.
language at this point, but you have to do that somehow. So for me, the way that I build know, like, and trust is through long form content on podcasts and through Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I found you on Instagram, and I knew I loved your page right away. I sent it over to Alex, and then I sent you the DM. Yeah, the content's beautiful. I actually downloaded ManyChat this morning before we got on the phone, so I was going to
Love it.
start dabbling with that and seeing
It's really powerful.
what I could use with that. Yeah, and setting up a little bit more of that funnel. I had something else I was going to say about that, but the no sleep brain just taught me a lesson, so
I've
I
got 3 kids.
apologize.
I've been there. Totally understand.
Did you have any other questions, Alex?
A million, but I mean, I think Dr. Turner, I mean, honestly, sorry, we gotta act like we have sense. We have so many more important things to do. No, I just find like after an hour, you know, I've learned so much, and what I would rather do is see you back in 6 months to a year. Hopefully, you know, your net worth hasn't become so high that we're small fish anymore, or ours get so high that you actually want us on your podcast. But I mean, the first thing I can always say is thank you. I
Mhm.
this is definitely one of the I knew the least about you. This was Tony's kind of space, and I love coming into pods. The hell? Um, I love coming into pods like kind of not knowing what to expect, right? And I just wanted to thank you a million times over for teaching us and the people. I mean, it means the world to me that I mean, you said it. You got a net million of not $1 but $2 million, a little more than that, and you decided to holy shit. Hold on, Tony, take over.
Yep. No, I mean, I would say the same thing. I knew right away. So I read The White Coat Investor. That's kind of how I fumbled into loving medicine and or loving the financial aspect of working in medicine. And I could tell you had kind of a similar vibe with some hot takes. And I feel like that's kind of where we're trying to fit in dentistry is getting the really common things, like you said, knowing disability insurance is for everybody, but also showing more of those hot takes that are maybe more generational or for our people. So I appreciated your time, a lot of insights. And especially for our business, man, you gave me a lot of little tidbits that I wrote down that I'm going to use and implement. And it's also good, I always think, to see people above you in life and see how they got there. Um, I think it's important. I heard some struggles you had, I heard some successes you had, and it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. You had to work through things, you had to pivot. And you're just like, I think everyone looks probably say super successful person, how they do this. And it's cool to see you did this just like everybody. You kind of hopped
Mhm.
around and you just kept plugging. But you always had kind of an end goal and a distilled version of yourself and your life that you wanted as your target. So that's something I hope to employ. So yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Awesome. I just had a house inspection go on, so sorry about that.
Well,
Thank you. I hope we will speak to you soon. And for everyone, unless you plugged it just now and I missed it, Meets Medicine on all platforms, right?
That's it.
Any email, anything, the golden email that people should reach out to, or
Yeah, you can always email me at jimmy@moneymeetsmedicine.com. Always happy to engage there. And if you send me questions on Instagram, I'm known for sending voice chats back in terms of answers because it's the fastest way for me to actually do that. So if you have questions, you can ask me on Instagram as well. Just follow along there and DM me, and I will answer questions.
awesome.
awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks again, Dr. Turner. Have a good Wednesday.
Thanks. Y'all too.
Have a good morning.
See ya.